Uganda. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The congressional health care measure is being sent back to the House after Republicans successfully challenged it for violating reconciliation rules. The Senate parliamentarian has stricken what Democrats call two minor provisions, forcing the House to hold another vote. The Senate must first pass its version of the measure, with a vote expected later today. As Republicans challenge the bill in Congress, Democrats are voicing concern over security threats from angry constituents upset with the health care bill. At least 10 House Democrats have reported death threats or incidents of harassment at their district offices since last week. House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer said some lawmakers are concerned for their safety.
People start talking in the rhetoric of putting people on firing lines, that if they don't do something, they will have physical harm done to them, other rhetoric of that type, or they put a target on their faces with crosshairs. That activity ought to be unacceptable in our democracy.
Do you feel that your members are really at risk in terms of their security?
Yes. I think we've had very serious incidences that have occurred over the last 48, 72 hours.
Steny Hoyer says law enforcement agencies have offered increased protection to at least 10 lawmakers. President Obama, meanwhile, has quietly signed an executive order reaffirming a ban on federal funding for abortions under the new health care bill. Obama had pledged to issue the order to win votes from anti-abortion Democrats. Unlike the health care measure signing ceremony of the day before, Wednesday's signing of the executive order was held behind closed doors with no media allowed to watch. The U.S. and Russia have reached what's being described as their most extensive nuclear arms control pact in nearly 2 decades. The new Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, or START, would replace a 1991 agreement that expired last year. Details have not been released, but long-range nuclear weapons would be reduced from their current ceiling of 2,200 by at least 500. A formal announcement is expected in the coming days. The U.S. and Israeli governments appear to remain at an impasse after 2 days of talks on Israeli settlement expansion in the occupied territories. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu extended a stay in Washington to return to the White House Wednesday, but Netanyahu has refused U.S. calls for a settlement freeze, and his government even announced a new East Jerusalem settlement expansion right before the latest talks. Despite objecting to the Israeli plans, the Obama administration has not threatened any punitive measures, including the withholding of billions of dollars in U.S. aid. At the United Nations, Secretary General Ban Ki-moon reaffirmed his stance that Israeli settlements are illegal.
I made it clear that all settlement activity is illegal and that inserting settlers into Palestinian communities in Jerusalem is particularly troubling. This leads to tensions and undermines prospects for addressing the final status of Jerusalem. Yesterday's announcement that final approval has been given to build 20 settlement units in Sheikh Jarrah is unacceptable.
The Wall Street Journal is reporting the U.S. is scaling back a number of harsh measures against Iran in a bid to win Russian and Chinese support for a new round of UN sanctions. The canceled proposals include restrictions that would have effectively closed international airspace and waters to Iranian cargo and curbs on insurance on Iranian companies and Iranian bonds. In Afghanistan, a large militant group has submitted a peace proposal to end fighting with the Afghan government and act as a bridge to the Taliban. The Islamic Party's overture calls for a U.S. withdrawal to begin next year. The group is headed by Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, a notorious warlord who received extensive U.S. backing during the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan. In Washington, Defense Secretary Robert Gates said talk of reconciliation with Afghan militants is premature.
My personal opinion is that in terms of reconciliation with the larger groups, it's probably early yet, or the more senior levels, that the shift of momentum is not yet strong enough to convince the Taliban leaders that they are, in fact, going to lose. And it's when they begin to have doubts about whether they can be successful that they may be willing to make a deal. And I don't think we're there yet.
The Obama administration is hosting a delegation of top Pakistani officials in Washington in a bid to increase military cooperation. Opening the talks Wednesday, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton praised U.S.-Pakistani ties.
Over the years, our relationship has been tested, but it has always endured. And I'm pleased we have come together again at this critical moment to reinforce our ties and recommit to building a partnership that will last. The United States comes to this dialogue with great respect for the nation and people of Pakistan. We recognize the central role that Pakistan plays in promoting security and prosperity.
The meetings come one day after a House Oversight and Government Reform Subcommittee held a hearing on the legality of ongoing U.S. drone attacks in Pakistan. Last week, the ACLU filed a lawsuit demanding the U.S. government disclose the legal basis for the drone attacks and information on the civilian casualties they've caused. American University law professor Kenneth Anderson told lawmakers the Obama administration's secrecy on drone attacks could fuel legal action overseas.
The long-term effect of that, given that there are not necessarily statutes of limitations in these kinds of acts, could be the problem of CIA officers, or for that matter, military officers, or their lawyers being called up in front of international tribunals or courts of Spain or someplace and said, you've engaged in extrajudicial execution or simple murder, and we're going to investigate and indict.
In El Salvador, the Salvadoran Catholic Archbishop Oscar Arnulfo Romero was honored on Wednesday on the 30th anniversary of his assassination. Known as the voice of the voiceless, Romero was a prominent advocate for the poor and a leading critic of the U.S.-backed Salvadoran military. He was killed while delivering Mass at a hospital chapel by members of a U.S.-backed death squad. On Wednesday, Salvadoran President Mauricio Funes apologized for Romero's killing on behalf of the Salvadoran government.
I ask forgiveness from the thousands of families who were affected by this type of illegal and unacceptable violence, and especially to members of the religious communities represented by the spirit of Monsignor Romero, and who maintain alive his legacy of peace and respect for human rights. Again, as President of the Republic, I ask for forgiveness in the name of the Salvadoran state for this assassination that occurred 30 years ago and which took our best patriot from us.
Funes' statement marks the first time the Salvadoran government has taken responsibility for Archbishop Romero's murder. In Argentina, thousands of people rallied in Buenos Aires Wednesday to mark the anniversary of the 1976 coup that launched a 7-year military dictatorship. The date's marked every year as Truth and Justice Memorial Day, with calls to probe unsolved disappearances and prosecute former military officials. The Argentine President, Cristina Fernandez, told the crowd she'll pursue justice.
Allow me to make a commitment in front of you, in front of all of you, in front of all Argentines, that if we do not get justice in Argentina, as president, I will take it to other international courts to get justice.
A tiny island in the Bay of Bengal has disappeared underneath rising sea levels. The uninhabited island had been the source of dispute between India and Bangladesh for nearly 3 decades. Sugata Hasra, an oceanographer at the School of Oceanographic Studies in Calcutta, said, quote, "What these two countries could not achieve from years of talking has been resolved by global warming." Back in the United States, the Pentagon's expected to announce today new curbs on the enforcement of the ban on openly gay service members in the U.S. military. Under the new rules, the military will no longer probe the sexual orientation of service members based on anonymous complaints, will restrict third-party testimony, and order a high-level review of all cases.